Hello, everyone. Welcome to another special edition of ELLE's 20 Questions for Women's History Month. We're doing something really exciting when we are talking to some of the new women of color in Congress as they approach their first 100 days. I'm Ashanti Golar. I'm the founder of the Brown Girls Guide to Politics. It's such an honor to do this with Elle, and it's really an honor to do this today with my friend who is a congresswoman, Nikema Williams from Georgia. We met each other when we both did Young Democrats, and I'm not surprised to see that she is a congresswoman. She's the chair of the Georgia Democratic Party. She is all of these amazing things. And I also have to note, we are doing this on Women's Equal Pay Day. So a reminder, give us women our whole dollar because we deserve it. And Congresswoman, I'm so excited to have you here today. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I thought you were going to say how far back we went to tell all of our age, but.
Oh, no. So before we do get into the questions for today, we do know that there was a horrific shooting in Atlanta, where you live. So I would just love to take a minute for us to reflect on that, how you're doing, how the community is doing, and also your advice on how we stand in solidarity with the Asian American community during this time.
So what we saw last week, and I mean, even the gun violence that we saw this week in Boulder, Colorado, just shows us how much more work we have to do, Ashanti, to make sure that when people are going about their everyday lives, that they are not met by people with guns who are intentionally trying to inflict harm on them. I have been talking with my friends in the AAPI community and giving them the voice and the space to lead, and so that I can stand in solidarity with them, either beside them or behind them, because oftentimes we talk about what we think should be done and not giving people that are experiencing the pain the platform to express what their needs are. I just got off a phone call with another member of Congress, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who was looking to see what she could do. And we're uplifting an organization here, a local organization, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, who have been on the front lines of so much of our democracy work, so much of our social justice work, and now they need us to stand up for them. And so we're giving people the space to heal, but also amplifying their voices as needed. So thank you for acknowledging the tragedy that hit home this week. But equally, we have to address the white supremacy that still plagues our nation, that allows things like this to continue to happen in our communities.
Yeah. So going into our first question, like most Americans, I was watching TV. I was excited to see the certification of the presidential election, which Georgia gave us that victory. And then we also won those 2 Senate seats. And I just feel really smart because whenever anyone asks me, what state should we be watching in 2020? I was like, Georgia. And y'all did it. But of course, then we saw, again, the awful violence, wrapped in white supremacy play out. And I was thinking about everyone in Congress, including my friends like you. So tell us a little bit, what was that day like, and how are you and the other members of Congress moving forward?
So on that day, it was the day after the Georgia Senate runoff elections. And I've been up all night, like in the middle of the night doing, if a media outlet called, I was like, yep, I'll talk to him. I'm going to tell the story of Georgia. Like, we got to tell our own story, because if we don't, someone's going to tell it for us, and they're not going to tell it the way we want it told. So I'm like, I'm going to do every media outlet that reaches out. And so the next day, knowing that it was going to be my very first time speaking on the floor of the United States House of Representatives as a member of Congress. And so I was a little nervous, a little excited to go, knowing that in a seat that I'm in that was once held by John Lewis, and I was going to have the opportunity for my very first time to speak, to be defending the 16 Electoral College votes from Georgia, which I was an elector in Georgia. And so I was sitting in my office and getting ready for everything. And I remember that morning on my way in, my husband and my son were still there because I'd just been sworn in 3 days before. And so I told them, they told us to get to the office early to avoid the protest. And I'm thinking we're avoiding traffic, we're avoiding crowds. But once I get into the office, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be safe. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. I sat there and started seeing the reports on Twitter, and my husband was watching C-SPAN because he's like, some people binge watch reality shows. He binge watches C-SPAN. So he's watching C-SPAN, and he was like, Nikema, they just removed Nancy Pelosi from the chamber. What is going on? And at the time I had no idea what was going on. And I started to see more reports coming in from Twitter, and people started calling, asking if I was okay and reaching out to me. And then the moment that I will never forget is the race for John Ossoff was called during the insurrection, because his race had not been called in the middle of the night, but during the insurrection. And it had already been called for Reverend Warnock. And then I saw pictures of someone parading a Confederate flag through the rotunda of the Capitol. And it was just the intersections of those moments when we had just elected the first Black man and the first Jewish man from the state of Georgia to the United States Senate. And it was kind of like that, this white supremacist, this insurrectionist was parading this flag through the rotunda of the Capitol to remind us to stay in our place, that trying to tell us that we didn't belong there. And that moment will never be lost upon me. And it just gives me the drive to continue to work, to continue to represent my community, because I'm not going anywhere and I'm not easily scared away. But I mean, just to know that now I have 24-hour security right now outside my house, because we received threats, and we were told that Democratic members and Black members of Congress had additional levels of threat of just being in existence, just as being members of this body.
Oh my goodness. So always praying for you, the protection of Leslie, your sweet baby boy, and all of our members. And I know you, so I know you're not going anywhere. None of this scares you. And one of the things that I loved seeing is you, Stacey Abrams, LaTosha Brown, and Say Ufot on the cover of all these magazines, the virtual magazines, articles, getting the praise and recognition that Black women deserve for all the organizing that they did in 2020, but also the organizing that we've been doing since the beginning of time.
Forever, yes.
Forever. And one of the things that is coming out of this is, how do we really support Black women? So what would your advice be to someone who is seeing, all right, Congresswoman Nikema Williams, I got to support her. We have to continue the work of Fair Fight, of what LaTosha Brown is doing. What's the best way for people to support Black women in their organizing?
So organizing takes time, takes talent, and takes treasure. So all of these things don't exist without the resources to make them happen. And Stacey is raising money through Fair Fight, and she supports a lot of organizations through Fair Fight. LaTosha is doing, the work that she has been able to do with a brand new organization in Black Voters Matter. I remember that her very first bus trip, and she was just trying to get the money to pay for the wrapper for the bus. And now look at what she's doing. So continue to support these organizations, but also supporting candidates. If you say that you truly support Black women being in office, y'all, it costs a lot of money to run campaigns. And in the United States House of Representatives, we're up for election every 2 years. I feel like I just got here, which I did. It has not even been 100 days, but my election is 1 year away. So making sure that we continue to not just say that we support Black women and women of color, but really supporting them with your time, your talent, and your treasure.
So you mentioned that you occupy the seat of historic civil rights icon John Lewis. Is there a piece of advice that he has ever given you that you hold close to your heart and that you really use and amplify as you're doing your role as a congresswoman?
So Congressman Lewis would always say that each generation has an obligation to stand up for the next generation. And he would say, and it's one of his most famous quotes, but if you see something that is not right, that is not fair, that is not just, you have an obligation, a moral obligation to say something, to do something. And so there are often times when you get comfortable and it's easy to sit back and not speak up. But like, I just keep thinking about, I am in the seat and I've been given this huge opportunity to represent so many people that are counting on me. And so I have an obligation to speak up. I have an obligation to say something and to do something to address things that are not fair, that are not right, and that are not just.
And you also are the president of the freshman class, which I'm not surprised at all. Like when I read that, I'm like, of course Nikema is the president of the freshman class. So what has been, one of the most unexpected things being in Congress where you're just kind of like the brain exploding emoji when you're like, okay, didn't see that coming?
Most unexpected thing. So 2 weeks ago when we passed the American Rescue Plan, and this is going to sound really corny, but I got this email, and the email was from Speaker Pelosi inviting me to the enrollment ceremony. And it had the location that the ceremony was going to take place. And they needed to know immediately. And I was like, yes, of course I'll be there. The speaker's inviting me to this. Immediately afterwards, Shashanti, I'm like, goes to Google, because number one, what exactly is an enrollment ceremony and what did I just agree to do? And number two, I don't even know where this location is in the Capitol. And so I'm like trying to low key find a map to figure out where I'm supposed to go. And so just the recognition that as a freshman member of the United States Congress, and when I say freshman, I mean number 435 out of 435, because new members, their seniority is based, if you come in on the same day, by your last name. It's alphabetized. And my last name is Williams. And so I'm like, okay, great. So I'm at the bottom of the bottom. And so to get recognition from the speaker and to be invited of such a landmark piece of legislation being signed and sent to the president was huge for me. And even that day at the enrollment ceremony, which I now know what it is, but at the enrollment ceremony, Speaker Pelosi, when she only named one person by name that day, and she called me out by name and thanked me for the work for making this happen for so many Americans, like cutting childhood poverty in half and getting direct payments into the hands of people that have been hurting for so long, survival checks, and helping just address this COVID pandemic that has disproportionately impacted Black people in this country. And so that moment, I was like, wow, I don't know what, I'm just here to do the work. And to be recognized for that work was huge.
I saw that clip, and I'm glad that she recognized you because you deserve all the recognition. And I also want to recognize you as a co-founder of Emerge Georgia. I'm also the president of Emerge. So we work together to set up that affiliate, which focuses on recruiting and training women to run for office. What advice would you have for women, particularly in the South, who are thinking about running for office, but still think that despite everything that we've seen in Georgia, we're seeing so many Black women in particular being elected judges in Texas and in other Southern states, that they still think there's too many barriers? What advice do you have for them?
So number one, there are barriers. So we just need to name that there are barriers, but also knowing that there are organizations like Emerge that are willing to help us break down those barriers and break through so that we can still run for office. You're never going to be a perfect candidate. There is no such thing as a perfect candidate. You're a perfect candidate when you put your name on the ballot and decide to run. So don't let anybody tell you that you need to do check all of these boxes before you decide to run. Because Ashanti, I remember when you came down and we did our first little informational meeting for Emerge Georgia, and we were at Punt City Market in a meeting room, and some people, they were like, well, Nikema, when are you running for office? And I kind of gave them a little side eye, because I'm like, number one, I brought you here because I want you to run for office. So don't you turn this back on me. But here I am, because I too thought that I needed to check all of these boxes before I would be ready to run for office. And one thing that I have learned very quickly is that you don't often choose the moment chooses you. And when your community needs you to step up to represent them, you're ready. You're already ready. You're enough.
Yeah, I remember so many people were asking you, and I was like, I kind of wanted to chime in, but I saw that side eye you were giving everyone. I'm like, I'm just going to keep quiet and keep my friendship with Nikema. And we'll just
y'all don't turn that back on me.
So we have our first woman of color vice president, who is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, which you're also a member of. So what kind of experience has being in a sorority kind of given you? Because a lot of people kind of wouldn't equate it that, sorority, political experience, civic engagement, advocacy. So give us a little bit more into that mindset.
So I had the privilege of meeting with Vice President Harris in her first official visit in her ceremonial room at the White House for Black History Month, me and 4 of my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus. And that's one of the things that she and I talked about, how 113 years ago, the founders of our organization of Alpha Kappa Alpha at Howard University, our organization was founded because for college educated women and to give us a support system to help us navigating our careers, navigating the college networks and everything. And so the fact that we were able to sit there as 2 members of the sorority in the vice president's ceremonial room during Black History Month, what our founders must be feeling now. And we're exactly what they were planning for. How does each generation progress further than the previous? And to know that now she had this network of people there ready to support her, ready to help her, was exactly what our founders intended when they came together to form this network of college educated women. And just thinking back through the election cycle, I remember when a lot of the mainstream media, it first got on their radar what a Black Greek letter organization was. And they were like, there are these women and they're making these screeching noises. And I
was like, what? I'm like, did they really just say screeching?
Screeching.
Like, okay, no, yes.
So we've not only put our Black Greek letter organizations on everybody's radar, especially in the mainstream media, but also historically Black colleges and the relevance of our HBCUs still to this day, because oftentimes people were told, well, if you really want to make it in the real world, then you shouldn't go to an HBCU. And here I am as a member of Congress, a graduate of Talladega College, an HBCU in Alabama, and Kamala Harris, our vice president, is an HBCU alum. And so it just continues to show us that our lived experiences are just as valid as everyone else's, and that we are continuing to elevate our organizations.
Yes. And also get better people in some of your newsrooms. I was just, yeah, Black Twitter exploded that day with this screeching, not screeching. So I do want to talk about an issue that is very close to your heart, voting rights legislation. This is something that you championed when you were a state senator, especially making sure that people had, equal, fair access to the voting booth. You were arrested, protesting against, just fraudulent election behavior in Georgia. And we're also seeing still in Georgia, strong attempts to roll back voting rights. What would it mean to you as a congresswoman to truly see meaningful voting rights legislation passed again? Because we still have so far to go with people wanting to just constantly make it harder to vote.
We still have so far to go. I just saw a letter today, posting today from the Georgia legislature, where they're set at 3:00 today to pass the resolution telling Congress to not interfere with states' powers and the state's ability to regulate their elections and to move forward with with their voter suppression tactics. And I responded that as a member of Congress, it brings me great joy that the federal government is looking at how we move forward and how we interfere, if that's the word that they want to use, with what states are doing all across this country. Because if it were not for the federal government, I still wouldn't have the right to vote in this country. And so, yes, there are times when the federal government absolutely should step in, because our right to vote should not be dependent upon our zip code. It should not matter which state I live in or which part of a state, which county in Georgia I live in, if my right to vote is protected. And so I was a champion of HR 1 and helped a lot of my colleagues to come around who were hesitant about voting for the legislation. But HR 1 is the For the People Act, and it passed the House, and it now sits in the Senate, where they just held their first hearing. And some of the remarks that I have heard coming out of those hearings are astonishing. Before I jumped on, I saw part of a senator from Mississippi talking about why we shouldn't have Sunday voting. And she said, because she doesn't do anything on a Sunday, and Sunday is the Sabbath and we have to keep it holy. But then someone pointed out of her doing a campaign event on the Sunday before the November election. So really, we all know what this is about. We might not be counting jelly beans in a jar anymore, Ashanti, but the same end results are what they're seeking. And that is keeping people like us from being able to cast our votes, because we played by their rules in Georgia and we won. And now they want to change the rules.
Yeah. We're seeing in Georgia, we're seeing it just all across the country, that when people can't win fairly, they just want to continue to just change the rules to their benefit. And just really appreciate you for being a constant advocate to make sure that we're getting better voting rights in our country. And before we go into our rapid fire round, so I have to ask you, you're almost approaching your first 100 days. How have you been getting into good trouble?
I feel like every day over the past, I don't even know how many days at this point, has been an opportunity to just speak up and speak out on the things that I believe in. And it has been so fast paced. And I guess it's because of the first 100 days of a new presidential administration. We are leading boldly and getting the resources back to our district, getting our children back to school safely. Our governor has decided that he didn't want money from the federal government because he couldn't give a tax break. Well, that meant that I needed to push back against our governor and make sure that he understood that there are people hurting in the state and people who need the resources. And so we're going to continue to do the work of the people, whether he's on our side or not. We have passed an extension for the Equal Rights Amendment. We've extended the protections around violence against women. We passed HR 1. Immigration reform passed the House. Gun violence prevention legislation with closing the Charleston loophole. I mean, so many things. I went to Alabama to stand with Amazon workers who want the right to organize on the job and have been getting so much pushback from Amazon. And of course, I got a lot of pushback from people around that. Right now, I am standing with advocates in Georgia who are pushing back on the corporate community, who are not willing to speak up against these voter suppression tactics that are moving through our legislature. We have some of the world's largest corporations here, Delta Airlines, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, huge corporations that need to step up and speak out on behalf of these restrictions that are coming down the pipeline. And so I feel like there is an opportunity every day with everything that's being thrown at us to get into some good trouble, necessary trouble, because there are so many people depending on us.
Oh, I just absolutely love it. Great. Going into our rapid fire, what's one day of your political career you wish you could go back and do again?
One day that I wish I could do again. So this is last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, I did a media interview. And you know how sometimes you replay things in your mind and you're like, why did I say that? And for some reason, I started talking about sausage making in the legislative process. And I'm like, why did I say that? Why did my mind go there? But it was on live national TV, and here we are.
I love it. All right. What are the top 3 things you need in your office at all times?
Top 3 things, and they're all on my desk right now. My iPhone, LaCroix, and a charger, because my phone dies constantly, but I generally have those 3 things around me at all times.
Yeah, I can totally see you needing to charge your phone all the time.
All the time.
Everything you have going on. So, what's one thing you've impulse bought during the quarantine and why?
Impulse bought. So I have Amazon deliveries every day. My child is now in my Amazon cart, and he thinks that he's actually buying things by adding them to the shopping cart, and they just sit there. And I was ordering just one thing, a new actually charger, and I made a mistake and clicked buy and bought the whole cart. And so we have all of these Pokemons that are coming that Carter put in the shopping cart. And so, yeah.
Oh, oh. Yeah. So that happened to me one time when my nephew, he was playing around with my phone and he just got into Groupon and he loves Subway and he just got like all of these like Subway like coupons. And I was like, why is this in my email? Like, who did this? And he's like, that was me, TT Shawnee. You take me to Subway now. And I'm like, oh my goodness. These kids.
And Carter thought he had already bought them because they were in the shopping cart, and I kind of finished the job for him.
Oh. Alrighty. Next question. What's the most shocking thing you've heard someone say to you while you've been in Congress?
Oh. So I've been really guarded with my time and my circle since I've been in Congress. And so I really interact with like people that I know are going to bring me good energy because there's so much happening right now. But I have been talking with some people on the other side of the aisle, and someone actually came up to me, another Black member of Congress who happens to be a Republican, and said that, why do I want the federal government involved in our elections? And I looked at him and I was like, dude, they wouldn't have wanted you to vote either. That's why we need the federal government involved in our elections, because neither one of us would have the right to vote in this country if it were not for the federal government. And it was kind of shocking that he did not see it through that vein.
I think I know who you're talking about, and kind of not shocked, but oh my goodness. What's one movie everyone should watch while they're in quarantine?
So I had to rewatch The Color Purple and Coming to America. I can cite them both by heart. I could act out a scene right now if we had the time from both of them. But I mean, I watched both of those for the comedy and for just both of them are just stalwarts in my movie go-to list. If I just need to just sit down and watch something while I'm doing other work, I just play them in the background.
Oh, I love it. Two of my favorites as well. Who in the 117th Congress were you most starstruck to meet?
I think Maxine Waters. Even though I had met her many times, I got a call one day that she was downstairs and wanted to meet with me. This was during freshman orientation. I was like, she wants to meet with me. She wants me to meet her in the lobby. And I came down and she was just there to like show her support and ask how she could be helpful. And I was sitting there like, this is Maxine Waters. And now I get to serve on the House Financial Services Committee with her, and she's a colleague. And so I oftentimes have to remind myself that we are both members of Congress now, and she's okay with me calling her and asking for advice and being there for me. But I was a little starstruck when the first time that she reached out to me.
Oh, we love Auntie Maxine. Oh, that is great. What's your go-to work from home outfit?
Oh, these Uggs that are on my feet right now. So I have on a dress. I actually did get dressed today, but I have on some Uggs and I wear them more than I should. If you want to spot me in the airport, look for my pink Toomey bag and my pink Uggs.
Now you know when you're at the Atlanta airport, when you see the woman with the pink Tumi bag and the Uggs, that's your congresswoman.
That's me.
What's your best advice for other moms who are interested in running for office?
Your children are watching and you're doing this for them. And it might feel like you're taking away time from them, which you are, but include them in your life, include them in the campaign, include them in your public service, and know that you're doing this for a better future for them.
That's so beautiful and so true. What are you most looking forward to doing once the pandemic is over?
Travel. I had my 10-year wedding anniversary was June of last year, and Leslie and I were supposed to go to Santorini for a week, and it was canceled, of course. And now I don't know when we're going to get to take a trip again, because Congress is year round and nonstop. And so we're going to have to work to figure that out, because I am looking forward to a vacation.
You deserve one. And our final question was, one thing about working in politics that people don't talk about enough?
I think people don't equate it to the fact that we are real people and we deal with the same things that you go through. Like, I was talking to a group earlier today, and we were talking about issues that are facing people trying to just get ahead, and talking about student loans. And I'm like, y'all, I am still paying off student loans. I am in this with you. I understand the struggles that you are going through, because I have either lived them or I'm living them. So we don't normalize the people that are in office enough as regular, everyday, real people going through the same issues that you're going through at home.
Congresswoman Nikema Williams, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone who tuned in for this special Women's History Month edition of ELLE's 20 Questions with women of color who are serving in Congress. I'm Ashanti Golar. I'm the founder of the Brown Girls Guide to Politics. I'm truly excited to do this conversation series with Elle, and I hope you all will join us for our next one. Thank you all so much. Bye.